Hello, good evening, and welcome to today's Facing Your Anger. I'm taking a very good look at anger. Um, when we think about this topic of anger, it is something that sometimes can make people feel a little bit embarrassed. And so, if you are labeled as someone who is angry, it actually is something that is not sort of appreciated. And if you think about it, when this experience of anger does come about, it does kind of leave you in a state where you don't have control. So, most of the time, if you connect yourself with having anger, it means you have no control. And so, these are kind of feelings that perhaps we don't really want to look at. But it's a very interesting idea of why, when we look at something, we resolve it in a very natural way. We think about when people have pain, somebody actually needs to be muted. So what happens generally is that when you have physical pain as well, it's not a good idea to apply a lot of pressure, but around that area to give some attention, because it's in that area that there might be a knot or there may be something that actually needs to be released. I must say, there was recently someone who showed me a very interesting technique, and it's regarding healing. And sometimes when people have pain, they go for massages. And so when the masseur is massaging, it actually ends up to be very painful. And sometimes people think that if you really press hard, hopefully it's going to actually release the knots. But this individual was telling me that there's a technique that you never go beyond the pain. So always work within the pain threshold. And if we do that, then the memory in the muscle also is that it'll start relaxing. Otherwise, what happens is that when the body actually is experiencing pain and you apply more pain, it actually gets a little bit of a shock. So in a way, it starts protecting itself, and then it actually becomes even more stiff. And so it's interesting that if we deal with something and we act with force, or we act with any kind of pressure, we can actually make it more stubborn. So today what we want to do is, we don't want to create any further harm for ourselves, making ourselves feel guilty or anything like that. But we just want to observe it, to be able to get a better understanding of what this emotion of anger is about, and if we can identify how it manifests in the self. And when I say the self, that we're going to look at ourselves, we can easily look at those emotions in others, and we can think what is happening. And so we then create our own kind of assessment of the situation. But each person knows for themselves what they're going through. And just because somebody is showing some emotion that is of a nature that is angry, it doesn't mean we know exactly what's happening to them. So it's best that we don't try and label anyone or any situation, but look at it for yourself. And if it is something that you can actually be detached about, you'll actually have better clarity. If you also come into this with this idea that I have to change and I have to do this and I have to do that, that already is a lot of work, and it's not a very kind process for the self. So let's use this time that we have together to really, first of all, get into a space of relaxation. So I'm going to invite you just to, wherever you are, preferably sitting comfortably, just take a deep breath in and allow yourself to come into this beautiful space where you're aware that wherever you are sitting, observe the space around you, the sounds, the smells, the touch on your skin, so the warmth or the cold, just to be aware of yourself and bring yourself in this moment, just to be present with yourself. And as you become quiet and still, being able to just feel, hear, touch. And now go to your mind, take your attention to the center of your forehead and visualize yourself to be an observer looking inside of your own mind and try and connect with what you're feeling in this moment. If there's any feelings of dis-ease or anticipation, just bring yourself to a point of rest. Let go of any of those expectations or feelings and just become present. Take a deep breath in and feel yourself filling up with this warmth air, filled with the vibrations of peace and tranquility. And then breathe out. Let go and release any tension of the day and become present. So now in this space of just being with yourself and being present, I want to just share with you the first slide. And in this first slide, basically what we want to do is we want to define what anger is. And it's a very beautiful way of looking at it, that what is anger? That when a person is in any kind of danger, their brain perceives a threat, and instinctively that person prepares itself to either fight the danger or flee from it. However, this instinctive response sometimes kicks in even in the absence of danger. This is why anxiety is experienced. So if you think about this whole experience of anger, it's when we go into a space of like either trying to fight something or to fly away from something. And if we go into that kind of stage, it's definitely a feeling of panicking. And so what we need to realize at that point is that when we start doing that, running away from something or trying to protect ourselves, definitely there's a feeling that we are experiencing a feeling within ourselves that we are in danger. So when that feeling comes about, generally, it cannot only be physically harm that comes to me. There are other incidences where I feel that there is danger. And that the word danger can perhaps come in a very powerful way. But I'm feeling threatened. I'm feeling insecure. And these are also feelings of being in some kind of danger, but it's on a different level. So I want you just for the first few moments, I want you to just think about what are the feelings that comes to you first, and then you find yourself getting angry, irritated, or you want to say something to hurt somebody. Just go back to that inner feeling that becomes the trigger that will actually bring you into a state of anger. And what I would like, if possible, that perhaps we can just in the chat share some of the ideas that come for us. So just take a few moments and think about it. What are the feelings that emerges for me when there is definitely some kind of outburst of anger that I experience. So let's just take a few moments and think about it. And what I would like is that if you could perhaps respond in the chat, if you can identify any of those triggers that eventually leads you to getting angry. Okay, so being undermined, falsely perceived. Okay, that's one. Any more? Disappointment, yes. Impatience, yes. Expectations, definitely. When the past gets brought up, right? Being ignored or sidestepped, definitely. Pain and hurt, right? So what is interesting is that this whole idea that anger is one expression, stress, interesting. It's interesting that we use this word stress. Long time ago, there was a very beautiful definition of stress. And this was used in a factory that they had actually manufactured chairs. And then they put the chair onto a shaker, and they made two different kinds of chairs. So they shake the chair at the same rate and they see which one falls apart first. So the one that can withstand the shaking the longest becomes the more sturdier chair. So I like to think about stress is our breaking point. Okay, disrespect. There was a few more: shock, dishonesty, definitely. So you can see that there's lots of different things that happens to me first, the feelings that I experience, before the emotion boils up to the point where there's an outrage and there's an outburst. So obviously what's happening, there's something else happening under the ground. And so there's another very beautiful slide I'd like to share with you that very beautifully describes this next stage. And it's called the iceberg, the anger iceberg. And the beauty of this little slide, it shows you where what is happening to us is that we experience this feeling here on the top, which is what is on the surface and what people will see as well. And you can see that the top is very spiky, it's very cold. And so when it meets anybody, it's going to hurt them. But most of the time, what's happening in terms of an iceberg, they say that the iceberg only 10% is on the surface and the 90% is actually underground. And so for each one of us, what's happening is that when we express our anger, it's only 10% of the real problem that we're experiencing. And if you perhaps look at some of the words that are coming about, it's very much the words that you have just used. And so all of these things are happening underground. It's almost like it's brewing inside of us. And as these things just constantly gets more and more and more, eventually I will actually have an outburst. And then that outburst is what creates a clash with somebody outside of me. But if you look at it, the anger first thing that happens, it first attacks me. So when I become angry with somebody else or I express my anger, it means I've already hurt myself at least 90% of the time. And it became so much that I couldn't contain it, that it actually had to shoot up. So the first person that is affected by this anger, which normally people will say that, this person did that to me. And so we project it outward. But what we don't realize is that all of these things were already happening inside. And I was actually nurturing it in a way. I was hiding it. I was keeping it under a locker of any form because I wasn't looking at it. And so when I get embarrassed, for example, um, I think because I'm not good enough, I don't have this thing done the way other people, so I'm lesser of. If I'm being tricked, then I feel a bit stupid that somebody had an upper hand and I was taken advantage. When I look at something that overwhelms me, what normally happens is that I look at the thing and I think that's bigger and I'm too small. If I'm experiencing grief, then it means something has been taken away from me. So there's an experience of loss. Stress, definitely that feeling of being challenged and too much being loaded on you. So again, you've in a way put yourself in a position where you allowing everything else to be on top of you. Rejected is a feeling of not being accepted. When I experience being nervous, that feeling of not being secure, not being confident, again, that feeling of uncertainty that comes through. Exhausted. This is something that people don't realize that, for any human body, even there's only so much one can do. And we push ourselves to such an extent that we don't actually have power left in us. And most of the times when it comes to getting a task done, people will drink coffees and take whatever it takes to get the job done, so that why they're doing that to themselves is to prove that they can do it. If you need a rest, you need a rest, and that's something we need to be very clear about. Unsure, again, it's coming from either confusion from inside of myself, and as a result of that confusion, I'm behaving in a way that finding it difficult to read. In any case, I'm reading most of it, so I think it's going to be okay. See if I can make my screen bigger. Okay. Is everybody having a problem to read? Is that one better?
Yes, it's better.
Okay. So, like every time I press a button, I lose my screen. There we go. So, what is interesting for us to realize that all these different experiences that we're having, they are actually leading to something that's very fundamental in ourselves, is that it's always measuring us as to who we really are. And most of the time, if we think about it, feeling of being insecure is that I'm trying to fit into a situation, or I'm trying to create safety with my surroundings. And we know that life is so volatile, things are constantly changing. So you're not going to get anything that is going to be permanent. And yet we're looking at things that will create security for us, that will create permanence for us. And yet the reality is that one constant thing in this world is that there's always going to be change. Bring ourselves to others. And in most instances, when we see others have something and we'll think, well, why don't I have it? But perhaps I fail to realize that, did I make effort? And they say that one of the key feelings that is associated, or a tendency that's associated with jealousy, is that I'm actually lazy. I don't try doing these things myself. And so we want something, but we're not prepared to do it ourselves. We don't step forward to actually get it done. Being worried. This is another tendency that comes because what's happening is that instead of staying in the present, we're always projecting ourselves into the future. And so then there's always anticipation and anxiety that comes through. And so we then constantly rewinding everything in our minds, how it's going to happen, it should happen like this. And so by just repeating thoughts and not doing anything, it puts a lot of pressure on one. Even if you have a ton of things to do, but if you stop thinking about how much you have to do and you begin to do each task, then the list actually gets smaller. But our tendency is to always emphasize what we have to do. And in doing that, we don't actually get the job done. We just actually make ourselves more and more anxious. And so the beauty of this understanding about that anger, the 10% that is exposed, is just something for us to realize that instead of getting caught up with the actual emotion, that emotion that we eventually experience is really a messenger. It's telling us that something, it has to change. There's something that's not right. And so we need to use this as an indicator to say, okay, what have I done to myself that I've reached this place where now all that's coming out of me is emotion that is hurtful, that's full of pain, that's full of blame, that's full of anxiety. And obviously, it means that I have been festering those emotions inside of myself. They say that when you press an orange, you get orange juice because that's what it's made of. And so if somebody starts pressing my buttons and I start expressing myself with anger and hurtful things, it really means that I've been harboring all of those emotions inside of myself. So when we take a look at the 90%, which is below the surface, and we begin to understand that there's a lot more things happening. Now, there's a lot of different things that is happening underneath. It might not be equal for everyone, but there's some that you can actually identify with. So when you identify it, what you then need to look at is that what is the root cause of why that has emerged? Now, this is one exercise that I find that is really useful, because if we want to diagnose something that's happened to us, you can go to a professional friend, which you can pay money for, and they will listen to you and help you work out what is happening. But you can also become your own best friend and listen to your own self. And the best way of listening to yourself is to know that whatever has happened throughout the day definitely gets impressed in myself, in my subconscious. So, whatever actions you perform throughout the day, nothing actually gets lost. Everything actually remains inside of you. And when you think about it, those stuff that is inside of you, how do we get them to a point where I can recognize them? So when you wake up early in the morning, one nice thing to do is to keep a little notebook with you and use that notebook as your friend you write to, just expressing yourself, how you feel. Now, remember, because you've had a night's sleep, everything that was in your subconscious would have surfaced. So when you wake up in the morning and you just ask yourself this very simple question, how do I feel? You'll be able to assess what was stored in the subconscious. And by taking a good note of all of those things that were in my subconscious, I begin to start recognizing In fact, it means that for the first time, you're listening to yourself as to how you have felt throughout the day during the different actions that you have performed. And so that first step of just writing down how you feel and becoming your own good friend in listening to the feelings that actually come about. Now, when we go back to those different elements, you'll find that uh, being insecure, feeling stressed, feeling judged, being undermined, all the kind of different feelings that actually come about. If we had to kind of like look at it, that it is connected to that I'm waiting for somebody outside to be giving me respect, giving me regard, empowering me, helping me, being supportive. And I think for individuals, we know that these days everybody is very busy doing their own thing, busy in their own lives. And not many people will have time to actually be your mentor, be your guide, be your this, be your that, to actually support you on your journey. So if you look at life with this one little expectation that there should be somebody out there that has my back, somebody out there that is going to look out for me, that's going to make things easy. If we live with that intention, most of the time we're actually going to be very, very disappointed. And there's one very powerful thing that does happen, that as soon as there's expectations, it means I've taken my power and I've invested it in something outside of me. And as soon as I do that, it means I will lose control. And as we started off earlier, we defining this whole idea of anger, it is a sense where I lose control. When those emotions just start coming out of me in a way that I don't even know where all those things were all bottled up, but they come out in a very disorganized way without any respect, without anything. It's just like you spewing and all of these things are coming out. So it does look like something that is out of control. So I only get into a state where I'm out of control because somewhere along the line, I gave my power away. And so that power I give away when I invest in somebody and I begin to expect from them. I'll think that this one will be able to do this for me. Uh, so I will have, excuse me, they will have that feeling that this one will be there for me, this one will do that for me. And that expectation means that I've actually stopped depending on myself. And now I'm putting my um, energy that somebody else will take care of me. And by doing that, really, what happens, we then become like the yo yo, which is attached to a string. And it means that we take that string and we give it to somebody and we say, well, right, you can pull my string up and down. And then I actually become subservient to that person. So this is something very that happens normally because if we have mothers, fathers, we have friends, we have spouses, we think that's what life is about, a partnership. So it's about I'm there for you, you're there for me, and that's how life is. But what happens is that instead of it being a sharing, it actually becomes a dependency. And then that dependency becomes an attachment. And so when we start becoming attached to individuals, we find that our anger also proportionally grows. And this is something that really happens where you think you are doing it with somebody who you know, somebody that you've depended on, and you think about who you get angry with most are the people that are closest to you. You don't normally get angry with any person. We seem to mind our P's and Q's when we're in public. But it gets a little bit out of hand when when we're in a traffic and people cut in front of you. Again, you're owning that space. And so if somebody come in front of you, you'll say, you're in my space. But actually, when you're on the road, the only space you have is where your car is. Everything else is still public space. But we tend to actually have this controlling nature. And so expecting in that way also then gets us all revved up. But what is important here to understand is that when I start giving away my power and I lose that control of myself, then I'm definitely going to become a victim. Because when people change their minds, they change their way of doing things, it's going to start affecting me. And those contracts that we think we've made with people, we can't really own anyone. We can't hold anyone at a noose to say this is what you had to do. And so it's important that in our relationships, instead of having any form of attachment or dependency, we create what we call interdependence, where each individual actually has a right to be themselves in the way that they would like to be, and we find common grounds to work together. And a beautiful image of this is, it's actually a quote from Khalil Gibran's book, The Prophet, where he says that marriage even is like two pillars that stands apart, but they support the same structure. And if we think about it like that, if we each know what we have to do, but we come together for a common purpose, then there's no dependency and no attachment. And like that, what happens is that my own individuality is actually maintained. What I found about this emotion of anger, that it really comes about in its way where it makes me lose my self. I find that one of the things that really goes away is our self-respect. And so what happens is that when we get into this emotional outburst, it means that I completely forget who I truly am. And we all know that after getting angry, the worst thing that we have to get over is the shame and the guilt and the remorse and the regret. Because actually, we don't really appreciate ourselves behaving in that way. We did it because it released certain feelings at that moment. But if we really think about it at the end of the day, we don't enjoy the feeling of having become angry and what it made me feel like when I was angry. Because when you're angry, the temperature of your body rises, your voice changes, your physical appearance becomes very harsh and almost frightening. You could all make faces to show what it looks like when you are angry. And so none of those images are images of ourselves that we would actually love to frame and keep up to say, yes, I really feel this has benefited me and this is the way I want to express myself. So we do it because at that point there's a pressure that comes about and we have to release it. So to avoid ourselves from getting into that stage, there's a few things that we can do. But before I actually go into that, I want to share another slide, which I thought was actually quite a nice image of what we're talking about. And in this, it's using the image of a tree and how this tree becomes your tree where you can hang all the problems of the day before you go to sleep. And this tree is like a big bear, so it can hug you and cuddle you and make you feel safe and secure. But this image of the tree, when I saw it, it just made me realize that we're always looking for something bigger out there to actually take care of us. And it's true that in this world, when we look at the stuff that's happening, that it may be really something that we all need, something outside of ourselves that we need to help ourselves to feel safe and secure. So keeping both of these things in mind, that firstly, I lose my self-respect, And then I'm actually looking for something outside of me to actually make me feel safe and secure. So let's first deal with the whole idea that when I lose my self-respect, I get to that point where I have no value for who I am. And that kind of state that we go into allows us to realize that we have been neglecting ourselves. And to care for ourselves is not just um, doing the basic things of taking a day off and going and getting a massage and doing a pedicure and a manicure, indulge in some nice good food, eat a chocolate, go and sit in the movies. That kind of stuff is not taking care of the self. In fact, if anything, the amount of sugars that you put into your system and then just sitting around the whole 3 hours or 2 hours in a movie with all that noise and external input actually is not helpful at all to the self. So what is important when we think about getting back and really having that self-respect is to regain my natural state of being. And what is the natural state of my being? It's being peaceful, being happy, full of love, being in an empowered state, my mind clear and open so I have clarity and wisdom. That is regaining my self-respect. And so we can think about what it is that we can do to regain that level of self-respect. It's not going to happen just because I'm saying to myself, I need time out. I need to really definitely think about it. And one practice for myself I found very useful is to actually make affirmations. So sometimes people meditate, and in their meditation, they use different affirmations to help themselves create a positive energy. But the affirmations I'm talking about are not a repetition of the same kind of things that we will say to ourselves just to, in a way, create a distraction from the things that pull us away. Like, for example, even if you counted sheep, eventually you'd fall off to sleep. So it's a kind of a distraction. But I fell off to sleep because I bored myself to death. And that is not really an accelerating state of consciousness. But if I can create affirmations like, I am enough, I am okay as I am, my natural nature is that of peace. So these kind of affirmations help me to build my self-worth. It helps me to create a sense of who I am, what qualities I have. And it's not for me to listen to somebody affirming that. You know, these days there's so many things that we can just put a CD on, or put our YouTube on, and we can be exposed to all sorts of things. But it's still an external sound coming from outside, which means I'm feeding that information into myself. So again, I'm consuming. This kind of affirmation that I would like us to think about must come from something inside of me, which I tell myself, not that I listen to or I see. It's something I tell myself. And when we talk to ourselves, what we're doing is we are reinforcing this link, which is very valid. Because what is important is that if you look at how our days are constructed, everything that we do is for somebody outside of us. There's very little time we have where we actually doing something for our own self. And so this affirmation, if I avoid any other media, devices or anything outside of me, but really focus my attention on connecting to my feelings and then affirming what is happening from inside of me. And by verbalizing it, I'm giving it back to myself. And you can make a whole list of that. I'm good enough, I'm strong enough, I'm big enough, I'm safe enough, I have everything I need. And as long as I can actually do it from a point where I'm connecting with me and then I'm actually saying it to myself, then what I'm actually trying to do is actually creating a sense of value for who I am. Notice how everything in our world is connected to something out there. So if I have the right brand and I'm associated with the right person, then I have value. Again, when that brand goes out of fashion or that thing doesn't exist, then my value decreases. So we need to really learn to actually not connect who I am to something out there. It has to be something that comes from a deep experience inside. And so that journaling that we spoke about earlier, where when I wake up in the morning and I just write how I feel, that's the first step of connecting to my feelings. And it's in there that many discoveries will be made about you. So as you then explore those beautiful feelings about yourself during the day, it's nice to affirm it. And if you feel that you are light, you are peaceful, you are happy, then during the day when things are going a little bit off keel, bring that experience of that peace from the morning and remind yourself, but actually I am peace. Before anything interfered with my day, before anything intercepted, I started off from a space of peace, and then you can regain that peace. Now, that kind of care is really like a mother holding a child's finger and taking across a busy road. So we have to become our own mother, our own friend, our own mentor. There is no point in actually looking out for someone because everyone is engaged, everyone is busy. And so, what I'm doing is I'm just putting more pressure on somebody else to take care, when in fact, I am enough. I actually have everything I need. It's inside of me. So, turning inward is perhaps the next most important thing we can do. And so we always see with these eyes, but there's a little third eye which actually we can turn inward. And with that eye, the eye of insight, the eye of spiritual wisdom, we can really begin to see really what is inside of us. And that eye is not the eye that is comparing from outside, because it's actually facing inward. It doesn't have anything else to look at. So it's not going to speak to you from a voice of judgment, a voice of comparison, nothing. And so that is something we can then really stamp as my value. And as we begin to increase our value from within ourselves, it's like we start creating a powerful foundation where I can stand on it. And when I can stand on my own 2 feet, which is where we say we are independent, it's that firm feeling that I have that I am secure. Then doesn't matter what changes, all the stocks can fall, there can be a depression, economy can be low, but internally, because my value is not based on anything outside, I'll continue feeling safe. I'll continue feeling okay because I know that what is actually supporting me is not something from the outside. And this is really very important. Even if I'm living in a family with many, many people, each one have their story, each one has their own thing. How can I make somebody else responsible for my state of happiness, my needs? It's not fair to do that. I am capable of doing it, and so I can do it. Now, going back to the idea that I can affirm and bring my value of myself based on what I'm looking at on the inside. But I want to bring back that image of the big tree. And so we're also looking for this big thing outside of ourselves that we can hug, that can take away our problems. And unfortunately, in a very physical form, there's no big tree like that. But when I look at myself as a spiritual being, this being of peace, love, and happiness, definitely the creator or the divine or the supreme, which is the parent of I, this beautiful being of energy, is the one I can turn to as well. And so it's really beautiful that we can all realize that there is somebody really that's got my back covered. And it's not anything physical. It's something that doesn't need to have its back covered. Because if you depend on any human being here, they also need to be supported. So I need to go to someone who doesn't need to be supported. It is the source of divinity itself. And whether you want to call it God or divine or whatever your name for it is, but it's also very important for us to have that connection. Because when you think about anger, it's a very restless, peaceless state. And the opposite to anger is to be peaceful. And where is it that I will get that peace? It will come in divinity. And so for me to reconnect with the divinity inside of myself by gaining that true value of who I really am, and then going back to the source of my origin, going back to where I come from that space, if I can reconnect, then I'll be able to re-emerge everything that is already inside of me. So anger can be something that can take forever and a day because it has a vicious cycle. You build up the anger, then you explode in the anger, and then you feel yourself repenting for it, and then it just makes you more unhappy, and then you build up more anger, and then it outbursts. So what happens is that if you use the system that if I speak it out, if I say it out, if I explode, then I release myself, at least it's gone. Some people have that tendency that that's a good way of getting rid of your anger. But if you think about if you do the same thing again and again, you're just reinforcing it. So the habit of going into a state of outburst then becomes a nature, a habit that you create. And that can't leave you peaceful. So you can't get angry and think that you can then sit back and relax and be peaceful, because the energy that your body gives off when you get angry, it takes the body 6 months to recuperate that energy again. And so if you think about why people get so tired all the time, they feel that they got no energy, it's because we're also living with this anger inside of ourselves, which is using a lot of our energy. And so then we don't have power left. So it's very important that we begin the healing process. And so the healing process comes by creating this deep sense of value for who I am. I need to give back myself the respect, take my power away from all the things I've given power to and people, and give that power back to me. Let me become the master of my own life. And we are the masters. Actually, nobody can control our lives unless we give them permission to. So, words that we use like, he did it, he made me angry, she did this, they did that, that's why I'm feeling this. That's in a way a little bit of a cop out. So, at the end of the day, what we need to realize that whatever I am, it's actually my making. I've thought it, I've spoke about it, and I've acted it. And as a result, the law of cause and effect has come to the party and give me the return of what I've been thinking, what I've been speaking, and what I've been doing. So if I really want to change my life to make it a peaceful life, full of happiness, not living on the edge, waiting for something to explode and then releasing myself, but I want to live a life of peace and happiness, then I need to choose what kind of thoughts I'm going to think, what kind of words I'm going to speak, and how I'm going to act. And all of those things that I choose will then become the way my life. In fact, you become the artist to create the life that you want. No one can actually take away that talent of yours. They can spoil your artwork, you can always draw it again. If you drew it and somebody destroyed it, who was the creator of it? They just destroyed the physical manifestation of it, but it has been created already in there, and that will never be erased. So we need to be able to own our own power and not give it to anybody. Something also that's very beautiful is that if sometimes little things do happen where you could be treated unfairly, people insult you without any cause, and you can say, but I didn't do it, but they accused me, and that's what made me angry. Sometimes we must just look at it as a test paper and an exam, because we are in this world. I call it the great school of life. And in this great school of life, we all have to write different exams. Some are easier than others, but we all have to write exams. And then when we pass those exams, we move forward. And really speaking, that it's our ignorance that makes us suffer, that makes us get angry, that makes us get unhappy, that makes us blame others. At the end of the day, if somebody has been unfair to me, I think it is like that. But I decide, you know what? It's their choice, their decision. I'm not going to get affected by it. Guess what? It won't affect me. And so that's really how powerful it is. It's just for you to realize that, am I going to use somebody's behavior to actually create an obstacle or a hindrance in my life? And even if somebody took away what you had, you can create it again. Maybe you can get a second chance to do it even better. So anything that happens, rather treat it as an exam paper and use it as an opportunity to have a second go at it, a new opportunity to improve your skills and enjoy it. Don't let anything come in the way between you and your own happiness. It's yours. And when we live our lives like that, we realize that in the challenges, we grow, we become stronger. And actually, when something else happens, we have a better way of dealing with it as well. So then it becomes a gift. And so then it's nice to say thank you, that because you put me through that challenge, I'm a little bit more experienced now, and I can deal with it much, much, much more better. So these are beautiful things for us to really just reflect and think about. The job that you have now is to actually make some time to listen to what the feelings are inside of you, so that you can really identify what kind of things are happening in that 90% below the surface. And it's those things that you need to look at and then work out that if there's jealousy, maybe I'm not really putting much elbow grease and putting hard work into a subject. Let me do that. If I'm feeling a little bit of worry, then ask myself, why am I mulling over things that are gone and finished and regurgitating it and just creating anxiety? Let me just be in the present. So tackle each of those different things and see which ones are causing you. If I feel that I feel insecure, then ask myself, don't I think I'm enough? What do I need from outside to safeguard me? So all of these different elements are going to help us revisit the attitude that we have. And none of us are perfect. So there are areas in which we need a little bit of polishing, a little bit of cleaning. And so do the work of identifying where those things are coming from. But once you've identified, we need to add value to ourselves. And this is where the positive affirmations come in, where I bring in those beautiful feelings about who I truly am. And definitely for me, having done the Raj Yoga meditation course has been a bonus, because the positive, pure thoughts that I've learned to understand about who I am, where I come from, has helped in those affirmations. So you find your way in which you can really affirm, but it must come from inside of you. You need to be able to apply this third eye, look inside, investigate, and bring those gems out and affirm them. And if I start living my life based on those feelings from inside of myself and stop consuming the stuff from people, then I'm definitely going to get safe. Then no expectations. I'm not going to become a victim. And I'm definitely not going to be a yo-yo putting my power in somebody else's hands. And then lastly, to be able to reach out to the creator, the divine. And it's very easy to be with the divine. I don't have to be anything. I don't have to pretend. It's just like going out and sunbathing and allowing the sun to do its work. So expose yourself to the sun of knowledge, to the ocean of love, and allow the rays of peace and love and joy and power from the divine create its warmth and love and coolness in your life so that it makes you safe and secure to allow what's inside of you to emerge. So I don't know if we're going to have much time for questions, but if there are any burning questions, let's just take 2 minutes to check in with you if you have any questions. And if you want to unmute and just ask it, that's also fine. Is there anyone? Okay. If not, then let's do a meditation. So I invite you to become totally relaxed, allowing yourself to just let go and be present in this moment. I turn my attention away from the physical things I see, I hear, and I feel. And I turn my attention to the inner being that I am. I am a living being of pure light energy, eternal, immortal, imperishable, and the very nature of my being is peace. This quality of peace is my eternal stamp. I am a being of peace. I allow the peace to flow through, and as this beautiful vibrations of peace flows from me into the world, I experience myself to be like a star, shining, radiating waves of peace. Not only am I peaceful, but my whole surrounding becomes quiet, relaxed, still, at peace. And in this moment, I make a commitment to myself that by letting go of all expectations, any forms of dependencies and attachments, I release myself from that and take back that power, knowing that whatever I need lies within me, the peaceful being. And for all eternity, the qualities and virtues of I, the soul, have always been within. And I take this time in the silence to re-emerge each virtue, each power, and I adorn myself with these virtues and powers, and I choose to live my life from the inside out. Om Shanti. Thank you. Om Shanti. Have a good evening and take care.
Om Shanti, sister.
Om Shanti.
Have a nice day.
You too.
So pack up your weakness, consider your goodness. Let the past be the past, let this moment be true. When divinity is yours, then forgiveness is the healer that mends a broken heart and restores a broken dream. May your heart be as light as the mist upon the waters. May your eyes be as bright as a beacon in the dark. May your words be strong as the love that lies within them. May your life be like a game that you play before you go. There are secrets